house now in the dope show.
You guys know who I am here in Cincinnati. What you don't know is before I came to Cincinnati, I'm actually from South Texas, West Texas, on the U.S.-Mexico border. Grew up in a town called El Paso. Some of you have heard of El Paso. That's where I'm from originally, grew up. That's where my first TV job was. I was a news photographer in El Paso. And I covered the news down there and shot news and then decided to go in front of the camera because you could make better money. So I did that. And for many years covered what was happening on the border. And then in 2007, this thing called Mexico's drug war moved into the city of Juarez, which is right across the river from El Paso. Okay? El Paso is about, the DMA there, it's about 1 million people total for the whole metro area. But on the Mexican side, it was about 4 million people living in Juarez. It's a huge city. It's actually the largest border metroplex in the world. And so one of the things we started doing was covering what was happening in Mexico. You know, it was a pretty sexy story. You got like crazy things happening down there, and the kind of violence that was going on. I mean, this is kind of stuff that isn't even happening in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, it's things like these guys were hanging bodies from bridges so that people on the morning commute would see where other narcos were, or they would literally cut someone's face off and sew it on a soccer ball and then kick it into a field where kids were playing soccer. I mean, that was the kind of stuff they're doing down there, right? Thousands and thousands of people being killed. Number one, where is the drug war coming from? Like, what's the source behind it, right? And yeah, well, we didn't realize that at the time. And so where's it coming from? And what ultimately is the end game? Well, the end game is pretty easy to figure out, right? You're trying to create a super cartel. And so the goal is to get one cartel that is completely in control of what's happening across Mexico. About, a few years ago, there was a guy named Chapo Guzman. Have you heard of his name before? No? Okay. Chapo Guzman was a guy sitting in a Mexican prison. And when Felipe Calderón became president of Mexico, Chapo Guzman performed some kind of prison escape where he got into a laundry truck, supposedly, and escaped from prison. Okay? He was the head of what's called the Sinaloa drug cartel. Sinaloa is western Mexico. That's where their territory is. Okay? Up until the time that Chapo Guzman got out of prison, Mexico was divided up into territories. So you had the Beltra-Leyva cartel, you have the Gulf cartel, you have VCF, which is the Juarez cartel, you have Sinaloa, you have La Michoacana. You have these different groups that are all over Mexico. And they all basically would interact with each other, coexist with each other. Nobody wanted anybody else to take over the whole thing. You stay out of my business, we'll stay out of yours, is what it was. But when Guzman got out of prison, all of a sudden, he decided he was going to take over everything. Starts killing guys from other cartels, declares this huge war. Then all of a sudden, Mexico decides, no, we got to get involved because innocent people are dying. And so the president of Mexico starts to send the military, the army, into every city where there are these conflicts. But when you go down into these cities and you actually interview people, they start telling you the same story, which is that every city or town that the military shows up in, only one side, one cartel, is targeted. Sinaloa is left alone. And so in Juarez, where VCF is in control, for instance, VCF is getting picked up. VCF is getting shot. VCF is controlling the police department down there, and they fire all the police officers and get rid of them. And so what he and I began to realize was actually what's really happening to Mexico. The real story here is that Mexico's government is creating a super cartel. There's a congressman whose name you probably don't know. His name is Silvestre Reyes. Have you ever heard of him before? Okay, Silvestre Reyes is he's actually becoming somewhat powerful. He lost his primary a few months ago. But he had been in office for a long time. And he had a niece who was kidnapped and held for ransom over there. Because one of the things that happens when you go into a community, if you're a bunch of military guys, right? You go into a community, you fire all the cops for a city with 4 million people. You have a big police force that's not out of work. So what's a guy to do? I start kidnapping people for ransom. That's what I do. So all these cops who had formerly worked for the city now became their own little group of kidnappers, hostage takers who would hold people for ransom, and then they turn them loose. And so the city became really dangerous to be in. If you were driving in any kind of a new car or even a decent car at all over there, they just pull you over at a stoplight, jerk you out of your car, take you away, call whoever was on your cell phone, Tell them, you know, $20,000 in 2 days and this person's dead. And if you didn't pay, they were dead. And sometimes you did pay, and they were still dead. Right? That's the way it was going. Well, Silvestre Reyes, this congressman from the U.S., had a niece who was kidnapped over there in Juarez, and she was being held. So the all-powerful congressman, who keeps saying on national television when people are asking him about Mexico's drug war, saying, nah, it's not that big of a deal. Nah, it's a bunch of drug dealers fighting each other. Nah, innocent people are fine. As long as you're not in the drug trade, you'll be fine. That's what Mexico kept telling their people, but it was a lie. Tens of thousands of people were being killed. It had nothing to do with the drug trade. But it was a lie that we were telling over here in our media too. The only people who have something to worry about are criminals and are narcos. Drug dealers, those are the people getting killed. And so then, what does media tell you? If those are the people who are dying, then who cares, right? That's what we call natural selection. Get rid of those people, because they're all trouble anyways. Get rid of the trouble people, and everything will be fine. Even though he's saying that, this congressman gets ICE to send guys over there into Juarez and to retrieve his niece and to get her and bring her back to the U.S. It all happens very covertly. Very few people know about it, except a guy from a website called Narco News. Have you ever heard of that website? The Narco News, this guy's got a bunch of informants in ICE who sent him a bunch of leaked documents. He was kind of like WikiLeaks for drug stuff. Sent him a bunch of leaked documents, including memos that are coming from Congressman Reyes' office, telling them, instructing them on how to go through this process of getting his niece back. Well, if you're a niece of a congressman and you get picked up over there, there's some strings that are cut for you. Everybody else, you're on your own. Because everybody else, you deserved it. Well, now what we've come to find out is through a little thing called Fast and Furious. Testimony by a guy from the Sinaloa cartel who's now been arrested and is on trial. He's supposed to go on trial, and he's been releasing information. And then because of a hacker group that got a hold of information from a group called Stratfor. Do you know who Stratfor is? Stratfor is they're a pretty big deal. They're like a private CIA group in terms of intelligence. Someone hacked into their system, their site, and the reports from the media were, oh, they got into people's sites and started sending out like weird emails to people. They might have gotten your email information. They weren't looking for your email information. What they did was they hacked the site and they pulled emails between informants and the guys from Stratfor, including Fred Burton, who runs Stratfor. And what they found in those emails is a long conversation about the fact that it's not even Mexico's government that's running the drug war. It's our government. But in the city of Juarez, our government was giving their guys in the Sinaloa cartel permission to kill guys from VCF and to cross the border into El Paso and to kill people in El Paso. Giving them permission to do all of it. And so what we're finding now is that the drug war on every level, from what's happening in Mexico today to what's happening in the streets of Cincinnati, to the idea that if we legalize drugs, all of a sudden the whole country is going to fall into hedonism and no one will be able to control themselves anymore because pot is easily available, like it's not now, right? Come on. And so all of a sudden the whole country comes unraveled because we have allowed people to make this decision. It's about power and it's about control, and media will never, they will never tell you the truth about it. Bottom line is this: if you're talking just from a counterterrorism perspective, if I'm running the CIA and I'm going to sit before the president to talk about how to actually combat drug cartels, let's say we get a president who says, I really want to do it, I really want to take them down. Mr. President, I can fix your problem in 3 weeks. You can crash the drug cartels in Mexico. 3 weeks. Legalize pot. That would do it. Yeah. Guaranteed. Yeah. Well, but pot is 70% of drug cartels' bottom line. 70%. Wow. You take 70% out of any Fortune 500 company, and they crash and burn. And the thing is this, you can't replace it. It's not like they say, oh, well, you take away pot, and they'll just put something else in its place. What? What are you going to put in its place? So, strictly from a counterterrorism defense position, listen, Mexican drug cartels, I will tell you, having lived where I lived, seen what I've seen, they are America's greatest national security threat. There's no question. We have a 2,000-mile-long land border with Mexico, and it doesn't take anything to cross that border. Little kids do it all the time. Some guy with an onion sack full of pot strapped on his back hikes across the desert, Mexico into the United States. In some areas, it's a little knocked down, and not even set up anymore, knocked down barbed wire fence. In Arizona, where Border Patrol is monitoring the border, did you know that they're anywhere from 4 to 6 miles away from the actual border? Because it's too dangerous to be up close to it, because guys are sniping at them from the hills on the other side. Wow. It is completely lawless. It's a 2,000-mile long land border, and you have extremely powerful, extremely wealthy Mexican drug cartels that are completely controlling that border. It is, for no other reason, legalize pot just to end their power along that border. The media is never going to tell you that.